I heard his head hit the pavement, and I heard the hollow sound. I just could not think of any scenario that my son would be alive.
Lance and Angela Even were driving their family home from an evening church service when Angela got an eerie feeling and asked the kids to check their seatbelts. Suddenly, the passenger side back door of their minivan slid open. Their 13-year-old son, Kenny, wasn't fastened in.
I heard the noise of the interstate, so I turned around to look.
When a van door opens, it's like a parachute. And I just saw Kenny just whipping around, being just catapulted out of the vehicle. And I slammed on the brakes, and the semi-truck hit us. Everything went into slow motion at that point.
About half a mile away from where the body fell, we came to a stop. And when I got to him, he was just laying in a fetal position. There was a pool of blood he was laying in.
Texts and calls were sent out almost immediately to pray for Kenny. Friends quickly arrived from their church nearby. Lance ran down the road to his son.
By the time I ran up and got to where Kenny was, my pastor was there holding my son, covered in my son's blood, praying for him. From that moment, we never were alone.
I put both arms around him and held him. Part of his face was gone, and there was a hole in the side of his cheek, the upper part of his cheek.
I guess very quickly realization set in that this is bigger than we can handle. And that's when I started to really cry out to God, and I said, God, we really, really need you.
Kenny flatlined several times while emergency crews prepared him for life flight to the hospital. Once there, he was placed on life support and not expected to live.
He was not breathing on his own, his heart was not beating, his brain was expanding with the pressure inside the brain increasing his heart. Everything was supported. He coded. At the time of admission, the prognosis was extremely poor.
Part of me did not want to believe what the doctor had to say. No, it's not no until God says it's final. And I said, Doc, I just want you to know that I've seen blind eyes seen. I've seen deaf ears hear. I watched the lame walk. And tonight, you and I are about to see God raise my son up from the dead. And I put my faith upon the word of God that he's going to raise my son up. We just need to wait this moment out.
From the first day, we said we're going to fast and we're going to pray for Kenny.
And we continue to pray and pray.
That night, Kenny's twin sister, Kimberly, told her dad about a vision she had weeks before the accident.
She says, Dad, I saw all this.
I had a dream. Well, it was more of a nightmare. Kenny fell out of the van, and then he suddenly just started walking.
God was just showing us that he was in control. He spoke this in a dream to Kenny's twin sister for our encouragement.
I guess just hearing that my son is going to walk again gave them enough reassurance to keep praying.
We weren't looking at the physical. We were standing on what God had said from his 13-year-old sister, that Kenny was going to be all right.
Church members stood with the family in round-the-clock prayer and believed for Kenny's healing. But for now, Kenny remained in a coma.
Medically, it was starting to take impact on me, that possibly he's not in there. But inside of my heart and in my spirit, my faith believed another thing, that God is going to raise him up. And I said, God, for thou art the God of all flesh, is there anything too hard for you? You know how much I loved him. I said, my life will not be the same if he's not here. Can you breathe life back into my son's body?
5 days after the accident, Kenny showed no signs of improvement. Angela held Kenny's hand and talked to him. Then, she says, the miraculous happened.
He squeezed my hand, and it was a moment of excitement, and I just said, you squeezed my hand. And I put my hand again into Kenny's hand, and I said, Kenny, if that was you that squeezed my hand, would you please do it again? And he gently, very faint, a slight move. And it was a moment of victory. My son is alive. He's in there. God is beginning to do something.
The doctors did not believe. And every time something would happen, a squeeze on the hand or something, they said, oh, that's just a reflex. But we knew better because it was in conjunction to what we were doing. We knew God could raise the dead. We knew God can heal the sick.
The miracles continued to come. A few days later, Kenny opened his eyes.
It was a wonderful thing to see him look at me and open his eyes for a moment, and I talked to him, and his eyebrows got real big, like, yes, I understand you. And we kept telling him, you are getting better. Trust God. Kenny, you need to be praying. You need to be seeking the Lord. You need to be calling on God's healing. You've been in an accident. And he would squeeze our hand, like he would know, yes, I am praying.
Kenny progressively regained consciousness. Now questions remained regarding the extent of brain damage Kenny had sustained. Until one afternoon, Angela gave Kenny her laptop. He logged into Facebook and sent a message to a friend. Kenny was back.
God had restored him fully. He had raised him up from the dead, give him back his memory. The devil couldn't steal that from him.
The very next thing I remember is just waking up in the hospital thinking I was in someone's room. At the time, I just was looking around wondering, how did I get here? Mom looked up at me and was just amazed that I was actually talking. I'm like, Mom, all I'm doing is talking. I do this every day. And she looked up at me, you're still the same Kenny, and like rubbed my head.
To the amazement of the doctors, 32 days after the accident, Kenny walked out of the hospital on his own 2 feet, healed.
From where we saw him in the ER and the ICU to where he is now, if this is not a miracle, I don't know what would be.
When Kenny was leaving the hospital, they all stood and applauded as he walked away.
Kenny's family encouraged others to put their trust in Jesus and never stop praying.
God answers prayer, and it's wonderful to be there and to see it in such a dynamic way.
I got to see Jesus face to face and experience the resurrection power of Jesus Christ.
I've come to a new plateau, a new era in my life of knowing God even more.
You just have to stay with God. You have to keep believing. He will watch after you and watch over you.